This is the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition. Good evening. I'm Sabrina Brown. Thank you for joining us. The island of Grand Bahama to figure prominently in the government's new master plan. The nation's leader speaking candidly with our Joan Davis Roll on the plan of action to revitalize this island's stagnant economy.
In an exclusive interview with ZNS News, the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Perry Christie, while on the northern island of Bimini, made this disclosure, and it involves this island's economic future.
I see great potential. We are presently engaged in discussions on the tourism product in Freeport with persons who would wish to go further in acquiring sort of resorts in Grand Bahama. And so the point for us is now, as we discuss it, we have only held up our discussions because we have just retained an international company called McKinsey & Co. to go into Grand Bahama, primarily to look at what the government's position should be on real property tax and business license fees that are now becoming the subject of an August the 1st decision, or decision before August the 1st.
The nation's chief executive says their efforts will not stop there, as a new Grand Bahama is in the making. The new economic impetus, he says, is centered around the infusion of investor capital.
We have begun to look at Freeport and Grand Bahama through this company and the advice this company will give us, because this is a time now when we must make some major decisions that will, I think, be enduring decisions for Grand Bahama. We're talking to a cruise ship company that wants to build a new port. We're talking to the Grand Bahama Port Authority that has designs about improving facilities down there.
The Prime Minister further states that key economic players on Grand Bahama are moving ahead with expansions.
As a result of our rolling back taxes, we had a commitment from the container port to expand employment, a commitment from other pharmaceutical companies to do the same thing.
East and West Grand Bahama, he says, will also play a pivotal role in the government's new master plan.
We put duty-free provisions in both East and West, so we would expect, therefore, that the benefits of investing outside of Freeport will be seen by all, and that it's going to incentivize the expansion of the economy both in the East and the West and in Freeport.
Joan Davis Roll, ZNS Network News.
The government has made the decision to postpone the referendum on gender equality. That decision was announced in the House of Assembly earlier this month, and tonight a member of the Grand Bahama Christian Council is commending the government for its decision. Shashina Roll tells us why.
Pastor Cedric Beckles of Life Community Church, as well as other members of the Grand Bahama Christian Council, believe that the government made the best decision in postponing the referendum that sought to bring equality among men and women in the country.
For a matter as complicated as this one is, obviously the process of educating the Bahamian has not been broad enough. I commend the job and the effort of the Constitution Committee. But there are real-life questions that, and I use this word small man only in the context of understanding the ramifications of the legalization of something, that we have that are not properly answered. And any wise government or any wise leadership would postpone something that's not being grasped by its people.
The Constitutional Committee met with local pastors last month to discuss the details of the referendum and what those changes would mean for women. While only a handful attended the meeting, many said the informational seminar was educational. However, Beckles says he does not believe the committee has done a good job convincing the Bahamian people, particularly when it comes to Bill number 2.
I do not believe that the general public has a clear understanding of equality and same-sex. Because in the world in which we live in today, maybe not in our country, but in every other country, including the one that overshadows us, this equality in same-sex has a totally different meaning. And the practice of that has a totally different meaning than what we are getting in this referendum. And what makes us so different that we won't use the same process and outcome that's being practiced right across the waters. And I think that's the greatest concern for the Bahamian.
Pastor Backles also believes that the government's decision to go against the will of the people after the gambling issue had an effect on this referendum and will present a challenge in the future.
Yes, it does create a mistrust in the minds of the general public as to the credibility of the government and their concern for legitimate majority rule.
A new date will be announced in due course following consultation with important stakeholders. Shashina Roll, ZNS Network News.
Controversy brewing involving educators on a northern island, and tonight the area vice president for that area says they are not backing down. Joan Davis-Roll reports.
Educators on the island of Abaco are disgruntled. The bone of contention is reportedly a new policy introduced by the Ministry of Education, which they say goes against the union's industrial agreement. ZNS News spoke via telephone with the BUT's area vice president for Abaco, Chantel Cox, on this controversial issue.
You would have received a circular a few weeks ago, an unsigned circular that seeks to change the work hours for teachers. Based on our collective bargaining agreement, teachers' work hours are 8:45 to 3:15. This circular has students arriving at 8:45 and it's requesting teachers to come to work a quarter of an hour before that time, which will be 8:30. This is in direct violation of the agreement that we have with the government.
Some 160 teachers, she says, make up the Abaco district, and some 30 educators are being affected.
The stand that we have taken is every morning until we would have gotten an audience with the director, the district superintendent on Abaco, and the principal of Central Abaco Primary. We are going to assemble each day at 8:30 in front of the school and not proceed into the school gate until 8:45.
She notes that educators in other districts are not requested to comply with this change.
I would have tried to get clarity on it because I would have spoken to the director via text and on the phone, and he's saying that this circular was sent out to all schools within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. However, based on my understanding and my conversation with school administrators in the other district, they are not following this. Teachers are not being marked absent until 8:50 because they are to report to work at 8:45 and there is a 5-minute grace period.
Cox says teachers affected in Abaco are prepared to stand their ground.
We are sticking with our agreement that we have with the government, which states that the work hours for teachers is 8:45 to 3:15.
Joan Davis-Roll, ZNS Network News.
Now, we reached out to the Director of Education, Lionel Sands, for comment on this issue, but he wasn't available and our calls were not returned up to news time. In other news, 2 people arrested in eastern Grand Bahama for possession of dangerous drugs and an illegal firearm. According to police, officers of the Drug Enforcement Unit executed a search warrant and discovered 2 black bags containing just over 23 pounds of suspected drugs, a number of clear plastic wraps of suspected marijuana, a brown box containing a kilo of suspected cocaine, and a black Glock pistol with 2 clips containing ammunition. A 42-year-old male and a 28-year-old female were both arrested and taken into custody. The estimated street value of the cocaine is said to be $22,000. The value of the marijuana is around $23,500. Both suspects are expected to be arraigned before the magistrate's court. Poisonous giant snails found in communities on Grand Bahama, and tonight a local pest control expert is sounding the alarm. He says the excretion from the snails can be deadly. As Shashina Roll tells us, a special warning has been issued to backyard farmers.
This is the largest and most poisonous snail, and guess what? Quite a number of them have been spotted on Grand Bahama Island. Now, a local pest expert is warning backyard farmers, children, parents, and everyone to be on the lookout for these deadly creatures. Operations Manager of Budget Pest Control Hugh Ferguson says it was a resident in the Lucaya area who first discovered the creepy crawler. Once collected, his counterparts in the United States identified the snail, known as the giant African land snail. This snail is not just large in size, but is also very, very dangerous.
This particular species can carry a particular nematode that causes meningitis, and so it should not be handled by residents, and obviously it should not be played with by kids and so forth. So it's a very serious, and it also poses a threat also to pets as well.
The excretion from the snail, he says, can cause meningitis, which is an inflammation of the delicate membranes that cover the brain and spinal cord. Ferguson says meningitis is a deadly disease. He adds that these snails are an agricultural threat as well, as they attack over 500 plants, so backyard farmers are also at risk.
Backyard farmers got a habit of, picking a fruit and just biting into it because it's from their own backyard. And however, if the snail would have, for instance, been over that area the night before, the snail would have left that infection there on the plant itself, that contamination.
He says these creepy crawlers can lay up to 1,200 eggs, and very little research has been done on the giant African snail. Ferguson says so far these snails have been spotted all over Grand Bahama, but notes that the state of Florida is also battling with a giant African snail.
But knowing whenever things are in Florida, they have a tendency to just come on the next boat, I guess. So we always expect that.
This type of snail can be identified by the inward curl of the shell and can grow up to 15 inches. Here's what he says you should do if you come in contact with the giant African snail.
What I suggest people do is really call the Department of Agriculture, and they then should come out, collect them, and then dispose of them properly, which the method that I understand to be most effective would be to burn them.
Now, Ferguson says these deadly snails also have cannibalistic behavior. Last week, Thursday, when he collected this jar of snails, 8 were inside. Now only 2 remain. It's not hard to tell what's going to be dinner tonight. Shashina Roll, ZNS Network News.
Thank you, Shashina. Stay with us. There's more news after this.